Welcome to this morning's Traders Helping Traders session. The THT is a series of bonus materials presented by traders who trade the apexinvesting.com trading systems by Daryl Martin. The purpose is to help you see how we as traders apply these systems and tools provided by Apex every day in our own trading. Of course, the normal disclosures apply. Trading involves risk and it's not suited for everyone. Please see the apexinvesting.com for full disclaimers. I want to remind everybody that this THT is not a substitute for watching training videos. It's a bonus. Yes, it's being recorded. Today's session will be presented by me, Lori, and the topic is reading chop and daily morning magnet. Okay, so let's get started. I picked out 2 days that were particularly really good with chop and I had a lot of questions from people, and they're really good learning days. So, I can do it randomly, but I did pick out 2 specific days to show you. I had someone ask me yesterday what I do when I first sit down to trade. So I'm going to kind of go over that a little bit. I do look at news first, and I check the VIX. The other thing that I do is I like to look at it on this alchemy chart, alchemy 2, because it is less busy on the chart. So I like to place what I call my morning magnets from this chart. And sometimes I just put them right on my C's chart because I find I don't look at this chart a lot. But for those of you that like simplicity, this is a little bit simpler than the C's chart because I have so many levels on that chart. I want every level I can get so that I can have a lot of touchbacks since they're my favorite. I just go on and you can see, 8:30 to 9:30, just before open, I mark every place, not every place, but most of the places that the price stopped and it didn't go any further. Those are going to be levels that are going to come back. Usually, if sometimes the market will move like crazy up or crazy down, and then these levels mean nothing. Uh-oh, we lost our chart. I just go in and just before open, I mark these levels. And sometimes I'll mark some from the previous through the night. 5 o'clock in the morning, I guess I call that through the night. Okay, and so this is open is right in here. And here's about an hour before open. So you see where I put these marks, these lines, purple lines. I call them the major magnets. They aren't major, but they're going to be important for the day. If you just look ahead a little bit, you'll see where here was one, and what did it do later at 10 o'clock? It touched exactly. You only see the bottom half of my screen, Jeff. I'm guessing you need to probably make your screen show in half size because it's bigger than your monitor, I would guess. Camera readjusted. Uh-oh. Oh, sorry. That's because, yeah, it would, wouldn't it? I'm so sorry. Yeah. That has a camera on that other chart. That's why. Sorry. Thanks. Okay. Got it. So back here, we're marking these magnets, or we're marking these levels. Just in the morning, I mark a few of them, and you'll see how they came into play throughout the day. It touched it and tested here. It touched it and tested here. And it was resistance here. And this is already 2 in the afternoon. It didn't move a whole lot that day, but you can see where those levels come into play over and over and over. And here it touched a level twice, and it came back, and then it passed it up here, but it touched it here again. Pretty close here. And the same thing, they touch these same levels over and over. And so the levels that it hit several times are really more important than the ones that, and it's hard to know what ones to mark, but I just try to take the 30 minutes or an hour or so before open and I mark those. And I've gotten to where I'm marking them on my C chart more because I just don't check this chart a lot. But that's just me. A lot of people are confirming with the alchemy, and so if you're confirming with alchemy, then this is a good chart to put it on. So that's my daily magnets and how I find them, and they're really, sometimes they're even good for the next day, and they aren't usually really important for many days unless they're hit many times. They might be, but they're really pretty darn good levels. Okay, so that's one thing that I do when I sit down and check the news and VIX, like I said. Okay, on to chop. I want to explain some of this. It was went over in the C chop swing out of chop section, but it seems to be where people have the most problems. So I'm going to go ahead and go over it. This day, for example, is from 4 o'clock in the morning. It's chopping. It's a big chop. It's not tight. And what do we know about big chop? When it's chopping really wide, you don't know what it's going to do. It's very unpredictable. So the important thing here is it'll probably, okay, look at the high of the day here, and you have wide chop, and it breaks it. So if you were doing a breakout of chop trade and you set your entry just one tick especially is not good, right above this breakout zone, there's a really good chance it's going to hit and it's going to fake break out at least one time when it's wide chop. And the analogy I like to use is it's like a snake that's slithering in the grass. When they're slithering in the grass, you have no way of knowing where it's going. They'll turn on a dime, and it's very unpredictable. Well, the wide chop is much the same. It'll turn on a dime. You really don't have any idea where it's going. And, don't try and trade that. It's tough. Okay, so when it gets tighter chop, then chances are it's going to do something. Then when a snake coils, you know what it's going to do. It's going to strike. Same thing with the chop. When it coils, and I call that one up, one down, one up, one down, it's going to do something. Well, in this case, there's just a little bit of chop. It wasn't a coil here. It wasn't a lot, and it didn't do a lot. 85.75 up to 87.75, just not even quite 10 ticks. So that's not everything works all the time. But as a general rule, the tight quit, and the more bars you have and the more time it takes is actually a good sign that it's winding up to do something. So that's really good. But you also got to look at your time of day. At 8:30 in the morning, I wouldn't be expecting it to do great things. Anyway, back to our chop here. These were trades that I took on this particular day. And people were asking me, well, how did you know this? And how did you know to do that? And so I'm going to kind of explain some of what I see. And I like to put a chop box in here because that way it really helps me see from 3 o'clock in the morning. And when I get up in the morning, I check what happened overnight. And I kind of draw a box in. So I can kind of see what's going on. Well, we'll go to open. Okay. So it had a nice little trend there, and then it went up. So it kind of started chopping around here overnight. So when it breaks out of this box, I'm going to be looking for a trade. Well, it really hasn't broke out of the box. So it's been going overnight. It's been going from about here. I guess I made my box a little bit too big. But so it's been chopping from the top to the bottom, which is actually pretty comforting to me because it's pretty consistent. So while it's in this box, I'm only going to take chop trades. I'm not going to assume it's going to go on a big trend. One of these times it will, but do I have any idea where and when? No, I really don't. So here we had open, and I always wait at least 5 minutes after open. So we're talking about 9:35. It was going down again. It hit the green ice, and it had a really good sell zone there, and it had some really good resistance above it. And so I thought, well, okay, let's try to go down. We got settlement below us, pulling it down. Let's take a trade. So I took it down, and I expected it to stop here, so I pulled my stop up. Yes, I'll explain about what I see in the VIX. Hang on a second. Really what I do, I was going to pull the site up, but what I do with the VIX is I just look and see where it is. I just use it for a ballpark. If it's 14 or under, I expect the setups are going to work a little less well. I like a third bar swing probably won't get 30 ticks. A fourth bar MVP may not get 30 ticks. If the VIX is up to 16 and 17, I'm going to be looking for bigger profits. Every setup has a better chance of bringing more profits. That's all I use the VIX for. It's just if it's low, it tends to be a little more choppy, and you don't get the good 30 tick, 40 tick runs. You'll get one or two a day maybe, but you're not going to get them. That's what I look at the chop, or look at the VIX for. Okay, so this opened here. Well, I'll just leave the chart over a little bit. So we had open, and it just bounced off this green ice. It closed down. So I'm thinking, okay, it may go fairly close to the last time it stopped here. It may go fairly close there. So I pulled my stop down when it went down to here. I had my stop here, and I got stopped out, and I believe that was probably 20 ticks. So then I thought, well, okay, you have settlements, you've got blue ice. If you can see this histogram here, you had a huge, you got some really big, strong orders here from the previous day. That's what this histogram is. It has the longer the line, the more orders you had sitting there. And so I have my doubts it's going to go past that. Now it can do anything, but you want to be prepared for it to do nothing past settlement, and it's going to take some volume probably to break through settlement. So I'm going to protect my ticks right there, and that was the first chop trade. Then it did come down, and it tested it down here, but it really didn't do anything. And so I went ahead and took it back up, hoping that it was going to go all the way up to the green ice. Well, I protected a little too tight, and I got stopped out with a profit. And then I got it retraced, and we got an elevator and then a swing, and it didn't go all the way down to touch, though. So at this point, I thought, well, I'm not positive, but it might have been a little bit of a quick move there. Yeah, it looks like it did go pretty quick in there. So if it moves fast, I'm going to give it more room when I move my stop and protect ticks. If it's moving very, very slow, I'm going to protect my ticks very tight. And since I really didn't want to get out here because I wanted to go up to the green ice, and I really thought it had a good chance of going since it bounced off some major levels here. So when it retraced, I got back in. My stop was 5 ticks. So I'm willing to risk 5 ticks to see if it's going to go all the way up. And it did. And so when it got up close, again, I'm protecting profit up here. And a lot of times if it's getting real close and it starts to hesitate, I will just shove that stop up right underneath there. So it'll take me out almost every time I do that, unless it's really going fast, and those are the fun ones. But okay, then it bounced off here, so I'm thinking, okay, it hasn't come out of our chop box. Here's our chop box, and it has not exceeded that. So I'm thinking, okay, let's try one more bounce down. And the thing that you have to remember is when it's bouncing and bouncing and bouncing, it is going to stop. You don't want to keep taking it over and over and over, because it's not going to continue. So it came down here and it gave me my 20, I think that was 26 again. And I'm going to settlement, protecting the same profit as last time, as far as I want to make sure that I'm protecting profit at settlement, because I'm thinking it's going to bounce. At this point, my thought was it's going to go back up to the green ice. And but I didn't want to get in, because it had already done a nice big swing, another big swing, another big swing, and it hesitated this time. And it did make it up there, but it came down here. I'm not going to take another one. I'm done. It's got to change its pattern before I'm going to trade again in the chop. I thought about getting in and going up, but I'm awful glad I didn't, because I wouldn't have got very far. And I'm not going to take it down thinking that this is because I was thinking it was going to go up. I mean, you just don't know what it's going to do. It's big chop. You just have no idea. But it hasn't been able to break this little zone here to this point, where this purple line is. It hasn't been able to break down past that. So I don't really want to take a retrace, although if I would have taken it, I would have been great to even go to the settlement, or just, if they wanted to go a little below. But I don't like those as well. So I wanted to wait until it changed its pattern. Well, I didn't have to wait very long. It came down. And again, do you see this histogram where you've got a lot of volume here? It looks like it stops about right here. That's a good, strong level. So it came down, and at this point, it's bouncing. I can see this really strong level, and I thought it was going to go to the ice, actually, but it bounced, and it was just really taking its time. And I believe it actually bounced up and down a few times within this bar. And so I thought, okay, we've got some tight chop, and it's going to bounce for a little while. We've got a new chop zone, basically. And so I just took 10 ticks and let it bounce. And then I wasn't fast enough to get in and let it bounce again. But when it, I just let it bounce and grabbed 10 ticks a couple times on the bounce. I made sure my stops were above and below, so it's just, it'll grab my 10 ticks. And so there wasn't big stops, and so I was willing to risk it. But I wouldn't really recommend this for a newbie too much, because you really have to have the tighter chop to do that. And you never know when it's going to break out of that tight chop. So I don't do it too many times, because it's just not a smart thing. And then you can see we've got our coiled little tight chop. It had a little fake breakout, but we've got settlement there. So it's kind of it faked, and then it came back down and bounced again, and it faked out this bottom chop again. And I wasn't real thrilled with that. But then it went ahead and bounced down, and then you've got your move. It broke out of this little chop line we had a new chop zone put in. And then we had a third bar swing, and this one I just loved. I was marking out my chart at this point, so I missed it. But you had a third bar swing bouncing off the bottom of where you've been in a while. And, could have went down, who knows. But at this point, you've got a third bar swing giving you a good entrance. The top of the swing bar is above this settlement. And then you've got the MVP kind of flattened out, which is really a good sign that it's going to take off and go somewhere. And you've got a swing point here. At this point, I'm thinking this is a really good trade, although I would put my entry above all this traffic. If it were, if I were getting in a trade here, I would put an entry. I would have it waiting for me there. So if it broke up here, it would grab me and go. And then what does it do? It goes all the way to the green ice and then even to the high of the day. So that's one day in chop that I've had a lot of questions on. So I just wanted to go over that. The other day that I want to go over while we're waiting on this, what instruments do I typically trade? I trade YM, NQ, TF, CL, GC. I generally post my charts just on YM and NQ because it's $5 a tick, and that's what's in the room more, because the beginners typically has less, your tick size is less, so it's less risk. So that's what I post my charts on. Oh, to 6.2, that was a really, really good day for an example of chop. I always just leave my marks on my chart. Okay, I was really kind of loving this day. When I got up, I was running late in the morning, and I got up and I looked to see what it did overnight. And I saw from close, the previous day was about here. And look what it did. It chopped all night long. That just tickled me pink, because I'm thinking if it chopped all night, we're probably going to have a nice run. I mean, it's going to, after a run, it'll generally chop. And if it chops all night, there's a really good chance we're going to get a nice run. And so I put my chop zone in, and I have the chop, the yellow lines that you can see here. Let me get my pointer here. The yellow line, and there's so much traffic that it's hard to see. I have a magnet there. There is settlement. There's the high of the day. That's a strong level, really strong level, especially with settlement. Settlement's the strongest level you've got. So if you add up all this strong stuff, plus it had a chop zone that it couldn't get past this. This is really huge when you've got multiple levels and it's bouncing off and it can't get past it. And you want to be on that bus when it finally breaks through. So I'm going to move my chop box along, and it broke through here. I had a magnet below and a low of a day. Now you could, I always recommend when you're breaking out of chop to not go any less than 3 ticks, because it'll often fake you out. And the thing that you had here is you got a lot of fling. That tells me indecision. It's not a smooth trend. It's not quite open yet, so I'm not trading yet anyway, for me. I like to wait until at least 5 minutes after open. By the time you have 5 minutes after open, what's it doing? It's chopping, but it's winding up. You got some pretty tight chop. It's not quite a coil. It's trying to, but then it goes down a little bit more. And I'm going to kind of wait and see what it does. And when it hit the same level several times, which happened to be a magnet that I had in here, it hit the same level several times, I'm going to just set it there and let it wait. And order 3 ticks or 4 ticks, or, somewhere in that. You don't have a cursor? Okay. Do you see the crosshairs now? So I'm looking at where it was open. I guess open was right in here. It took a long time for these bars to form. Okay, then open hit, and you've got chop starting. The biggest thing to think about when you have open, I know people are anxious to get in trades, but let it shake out. Let it see what it's going to do. Don't be in a hurry. And because you could have got in this chop and you would have definitely hit your stops there. It wouldn't have. But anyway, you can see that it's starting to a tight chop. It had bounced off this a lot of really major levels. It came down. If you got in before open and had the patience to sit through it, you would have been rewarded in that time. Then you've got E's coming down, telling you you're probably going to break out of this chop, going down, and you kind of broke the chop. And when it's winding tight, I'm going to put my order here, waiting, just sitting there waiting. If it picks it up, it picks it up. If it doesn't and wants to go up, I'd put an order up here, waiting to go up. But it's playing down low. So I put an order in, and I came down, and I'm protecting ticks near, I think this one came so fast I couldn't move the take profit. That's what happened there. I had a 30 tick take profit. I couldn't move it fast enough, if I remember right, because when it zooms fast, I want to give it room. At that point, I'm going to shove my take profit way far out of the way, and I'm going to pull my stop up, but I'm going to give it at least 20 ticks to mess around. So when it hits 20, I'll pull it to maybe break even. When it hits 30, I might pull it to 10. I want to give it a lot of room so that if it does come down and do some messing around like it did here, a little pullback, it's going to have that. So, but I didn't get it moved out of the way. And so I got stopped out with 30 ticks. That's not a bad thing. But since I normally would have, had I had time to move it, I would have given it room. As soon as I see it retracing, I want back in. And I don't have a level as such here to touch back to. You'd have to go back further, and it was frankly moving too fast. I didn't. It almost came back to the negative 0.5 from yesterday, but I just went ahead when it hit this EMA, because it was moving so fast. I got back in. And then it had an E pop up, which gave me confidence to stay in. And if you would have waited until you had your E, you still could have got some nice tickage there. I like getting in on the retraces, so that's why I got in there. And I believe that's another 30 ticks that I was giving it room. So when it went down here, I pulled my stop down. At that point, I can't remember what the actual run was, but when it's getting to be a long run, I'm going to start pulling my stop a little closer, because I don't expect it to go to 150 ticks. I don't expect it to go to a huge run. By that time, I had 60 ticks racked up in this, and I'm not gonna let too many give back. So when it bounced off here, it knocked me out, and then it went, and I wasn't real sure that it wasn't going to bounce. That was a nice run. I waited, and I thought it was probably going to bounce around. Had you gotten in on the third bar swing here, it gave you a perfect entry. I just didn't take it, but it really turned out to be a nice entry. Your stop would have been down one tick below this bar, so you would not have got stopped out on this one, and would have got some nice. I got in again when it swung past this power line. I used this as a swing point, and when it swung back up there, I got in and grabbed another probably 20. I like to put my, the question was asked, how many ticks above or below the chop box do I put my order in? I generally go 3. Or in this case, I have a magnet. The better thing that I like even more is to put the entry on the other side of a major line just outside the chop box. Because in my opinion, it's going to probably test that line, especially when it's got a big wide chop like that. It's gonna come down and do some testing before it does anything really whippy. And so I had a magnet here, so it came down, and I wouldn't have gotten in except under this magnet, which is exactly what I did. So, and up here, if it would have went up instead of down, I would have put my entry 3 ticks above this magnet here, and I would have gotten in above it. The blue ice I wouldn't have been so worried about, but I would have been watching out here at this level because it was a level that hadn't been exceeded in a while, and up to the green eye. You can see at this where these green swing points are. You see this histogram behind it? It had a lot of orders picked up just above settlement there. So I would have really been leery and keeping my stops tight here. That, generally speaking, you've got a little wind up here, and look at your MVP went flat. That's another good little indication. And what did it do? It touched back on the chop box. It tested that chop level again, and the MVP went flat, and you've got the coil starting. I like to see more coil than that, but it still tells you if you've got enough coil to make the MVP go flat, that's a good indication it's going to move. And so is it going to go up or down? Well, who knows? It is hard to see the histogram. I have it so very light because otherwise it's distracting. It is really hard to see. I have to agree with you there, Kelly. But once it broke, it had this little, the tight coil chop, and it broke. Well, you got some hits. Do I apply the same logic and analysis for all instruments that I trade besides? Yes, I apply everything the same to any instrument. Yes. Bonds is a little bit different. It's got a little personality of its own. You really got to know bonds. But other than that, all the other instruments, I haven't seen any that don't react about the same. Is there anything that I haven't covered that you have questions on? What questions, comments? I mean, it's really the same thing over and over. When it coils, you're looking for a nice breakout. When it's a big chop, you have to be really careful because you're going to have fake breakouts with a big chop. And I generally don't like to take the first one. You had a little breakout, but settlement was there. And look at all those levels. When you have a lot of levels and it bounces off them, look for an entry. Will this work with spreads or just futures? It'll work with spreads. Go through a touchback setup. Okay. It will work with spreads if you're careful on not taking the little chop trades because you don't have time to make a profit. How much am I paying attention to volume? Volume has a little bit to do with how I trail my stops. I get that question a lot. That's another thing I wanted to cover a little bit. How do I trail my stops and how do I move them up? I don't use an auto stop trail. Those are great for your long-term trend trades, but I'm scalping. I'm trying to get some pretty major tickage there on some of the bigger scalps and mini trends, as I call them. But if it's moving fast, I give it more room. I want to let it do its thing. If it's really moving slow, and the VIX is low, I am going to really keep a tight. I'm going to protect 5 ticks or maybe 10 ticks. 10 is what I would hope to get the minimum I'd get. I get kicked out at 10 a lot. But that's really what I do. I look at, if you've got exceeding volume, I'm going to give it room to run, and I'm not going to follow it. I'm not going to trail it quite so tight. Okay, let me quick get some questions out of here before I go through a touchback setup. Do the ICE have any meaning if they're to stay below the red? Yeah, I like to watch that. I really like to pay attention to if it's below the red ice. If it's been below the red ice for an hour, I'm thinking it's probably going to stay there. And I'm going to be careful if, for example, on this way up, if you're looking at the bigger picture, which I generally, in the morning, I try to get the bigger picture for my little magnets and that kind of thing and overall chop, but I'm not looking for big trends generally. But for those of you that are, if you're taking a big trend and giving it a lot of room, it's been under this red ice since, well, geez, forever. It went up and tested, but it came back down, and it could not get above the red ice. So I'm going to pull up my stops and be very careful. When the green ice is the same, if it's above the green ice and when it gets down near the green ice, I'm going to keep my stops tight. So that's part of how I use the ice. If it's been under a long time, I'm going to expect it's going to stay under. Although at some point it's not going to. Okay, how much are you paying attention to volume? Okay, that's what I use for my trailing. I talked about that. Do you take into consideration the general trend of the instrument, previous days, or do you just take trades regarding indicators for that day? I just follow the indicators for this day mainly. I like to look overnight and see if it chopped or trended or what it did overnight, but generally I'm taking little scalps. So for me, I don't look at the big trends a whole lot because I'm not too concerned with them. Not having a bias, in other words, when I start the day. I try not to. I try not to assume anything that it's going to go one direction or the other. In this case, up here, at 8 o'clock it hit, and you've got a lot of, oh my gosh, those are huge levels when you've got so many. And it would be wise at that point, once it does close back down, I wouldn't think it was going to cross over that, and I would tend to want to take the trade down. I see trending overnight. What does that tell me? It tells me I'm probably going to have some wide chop at the very least, and I'm going to want my chop box, and I'm going to not expect it to exceed my chop box until it does. That sounds really good, doesn't it? But it's going to have to prove to me that it's going to pass that chop box and any levels that are near it. When do I utilize trend or momentum? I put that on there because I'm trying to use that to stay in a trade for my trailing stop. When I move my stop, if it's, for example, it stays the dark red, well, stay in there and let it go. Give it room. I don't do a really good job of that, but that's why it's there. It's a really good way to trail your stop. Use it to help you trail your stop. If tells you when to loosen up and let it go so you don't get knocked out too soon, and when to tighten up. Like it turned here, so maybe it's time to tighten that baby up. And comment on how the deviation mountain clouds and deviation levels impact your decision. They don't impact my decision a whole lot. It's really, you expect one deviation move for the day, generally speaking. And this deviation mountain is part of, Marilyn uses it a lot in her world, and she can read these like none other. I don't have as good of luck with it, but when it hit this little black dotted line here, tells you it's hit 3/4 of its high to low move. And so at that point, once it goes past that, you're looking for it to probably turn around. You're looking for what Marilyn calls a mountain trade. I don't watch those real close, but they are spot on if you're watching them. And I like to look at it. So I like to have all the information I can on my charts. You'd never guess that looking at my chart, would you? But I like all these different levels. They really they tell you a lot. I mean, it chopped this old chop zone. It did pass it, but it still played around it. So this level is important. Whatever it is, whatever this original level was, it's important because it can't get past it here. It comes back. What happens when it hits it here? It can't go very far past it for a little while. It really has to work to get past this. I mean, these chop boxes are incredibly accurate as far as, I put it on from overnight, and whatever is holding it there, it continues to be. Look at how it came down here and hit exactly that chop level again and bounced off it. And what's it going to do? Okay, it can't go very far. It's kind of, but then we got some tight chops winding. And when it does finally close past it, then you've got a little short trend. Does that help? Okay, how do I set up for a touchback? I like the new, when we get a new template, when we get a new toolkit, the new template will have this 8 EMA. It's really helpful for the touchbacks because you can see here the bar is going, the EMA is going through the bar. The trend was not long enough to get a touchback if there was one. And here it's just clipping it. So the next bar probably still isn't a real good candidate for a touchback. But this is, the EMA has cleared this bar. It does not go through this bar. That means you've had enough trend to take a touchback. And if you don't have the EMA on, you had a swing here, and that's not a good thing for a touchback. So by the time you get up here, you've got your power line. You could take the touchback to the power line if you're looking at the EMA because your bars, the previous bar cleared it. Kind of hard to, I'm not explaining this very well, but that is a good indication of it's safe to take an EMA, safer to take an EMA, and you won't get chopped out. If this EMA is going through your bars, you're likely to have some chop. Now, when you have an immediate reversal, of course, that doesn't apply, but you don't know what it's going to be at the time. And I would have thought this was chop myself, but it turns out this third bar swing was golden. And you had a flat MVP. So when you have a flat MVP, that's a really good sign that it's going to go somewhere. Yes, it has to be clear of the candle body. The 8 EMA needs to be clear of the candle body. You really don't care if it's going through a sling, a wick. You don't care. But you want it to be clear of the candle body. So when it hit this 8 EMA, for example, this power line, sorry, and it came down and touched this power line, I was already in, of course, because I got in the swing, but I would have an order sitting here. I would have a buy order, for example, and I would be bringing it up as it moved up. Now, I might not have got that because I like to follow the EMA line and bring it up. It's just because when it hits it, it just makes for a really good touchback. But this one went down, and it would have been a great touchback. And if you're, but I would have had it down here, so it wouldn't have touched it wouldn't have picked me up. If I would have wanted to get it, I would have had to jump and grab it on its way up. And at this point, who knows if it's going to come down further or if it's going to keep going. That's the great thing about a touchback. It's such a small risk. But as I'm going here, it's coming down, and look, the bar previous was a long way away from that EMA line. So that's a good candidate for a touchback. And if you follow this line going straight up, your order would probably be set about here. And yeah, it came down a little bit further, but did it go up? Yep, it was great. And you have your EMA. It didn't give you there wasn't a good line level to touch back to. And if you're just touching back to the EMA itself, you're going to get eventually creamed because you'll hit every reversal, and they're really not a good thing. I look at in real time. You can see if it's taking a long time to move. Be careful. You don't have a lot of momentum. You want to catch some momentum in there, and that when you got the momentum, that's where you're going to get the better touchbacks. I don't like to be in a trade that's just sitting and sitting and sitting. It drives me crazy. So there wasn't a good level, but if you look back, you might have had a nice, you might have had another level that you could touch back to. That's why I like to check these levels, because you never know what your level might be that you could actually touch back to. But I mean, this shows you a really good one where you had nothing here to touch back to, no level. But here you had it touch back exactly to a magnet. So as it's going up here and it's hitting this magnet, I'm probably going to have an order sitting right here waiting a tick above this purple magnet, and it'd just be waiting, and then protect it. Well, protect it 10 or 20. It's going inside the chop box, so I'm going to think it's probably going to chop a little bit because it's heading back into that chop box. So that kind of, I keep an order out. If I'm not seeing the good setup that I like, I keep an order out. Or if I missed a good entry for a trend, I keep an order out and I just move it up so that it'll. Do all touchbacks have to have a wick? Yeah, they pretty much do, or they wouldn't be touching back. They have to go up and come down to touch back. Tag your it, go. Is basically what it's doing. Otherwise, you'd have just a swing level. You had, your swing would have to have your 20 tick stop. Minimum wick height requirement. No, that's where your EMA comes in. The EMA shows you if it didn't touch the bar before, it shows you that it's probably safer to do a touchback there. Yeah, that's what I look at. It's coming down to tag that line and go on up. And by the time you get this one bar, look at it, 505.25. Okay, so you get in at 505.50. By the time you're done with the bar, you've got 509. You've already got 10 picks and then some. Chat room's always open on Saturdays, and yeah, today's a special reason because of the THT. We used to do a lot of Saturday stuff in here, back testing and whatnot, but lately not so much. Did I answer your question enough on the touchback, Craig? I actually want to make a video that shows with replay, putting the order down and actually waiting for it and moving the stop. It's really a hard question. How do you move your stop? I don't have, if I had a set stop that I was moving, I would do an auto trail, but I don't. I really watch market conditions when I'm trailing my stop, and if it is if it's really hesitating and not doing anything, I'm going to try to get, protect 5-10 ticks. But if it's moving fast, like for example, this one right here, if I wouldn't have had this order sitting here, I never would have been able to grab that. I would not have been fast enough. And so when it does that, I am all about giving it a lot of space. And I want my take profit, shoved way out of the way. A lot of times, and that's why I also, that's a good point, I like to set my take profit at 30, even if I'm going for 10 or 20, because in case it wants to move really fast and give me more, I'm not going to reject that at all. So I like to protect 10 or protect 20 so that, that's my scalp protected then, but if it wants to give me more, I want to let it. Okay, any other questions? Where there are markets I would recommend for night trading. For night trading, the markets that move more are the markets that have at least one, for Forex, one side is open. For example, USD, JPY at night works when the Asian session is open because the JPY side is open. So AUD, USD, the Australian session runs, with the Asian session pretty much, I think. So that would be a good one that moves more. If one side of the desk is not open, you could have one big player come in and knock your trade out really easy. Okay. Questions. Is my ATM setup different for TBS versus no, what I do, I'm not fast enough to select different ATM strategies. I'm not sure if they'll show up here. Okay, they do. Okay, I'm not fast enough to select different strategies. So I keep it at 110.30, and when it comes on my chart, if it's a touchback, I immediately move that up from a 10 tick stop to a 5. If it is a touchback, I immediately move it down to 20 ticks, or at the bar, it's like the third bar swing, a tick below the bar. I just, because I don't want to, if I'm doing a touchback and I have a 5 tick stop, but what if I jump in there later and I need that extra stop, that extra room because I got in a little late? If I have it at 5 ticks and I got in late, I'm going to have to move it fast or I'm going to get stopped out. I'm not that fast. So I always leave it at I leave it at 10 for my stop and 30 for my take profit. Because then if it does zoom up like this time, it zoomed down and took my 30 ticks. But, if I was looking for just 10, well, I got my 30 like that. So major streets are strong price levels. Yes, they are. Okay. If you want to trade with the Breakfast Club in the morning, you just get on and you're here in the morning and you're in the Breakfast Club. Simple as that. Yeah, that seems to be the JPY, AUD, New Zealand. They're good at night. Okay. Any other questions? I want to wrap this up pretty soon. It's been a good hour. I want to keep them shorter. Try to do a few more of these a little more often, so we don't want to have 2-hour long videos to go through. Do I have any other questions? Or did I miss any? I guess we'll wrap it up then. And I'm going to try to get you a video, just a real quick 5 or 10 minute video that shows how I set it down for a touchback and letting it come and get me and moving the stop. I'm undecided as to which strategy to pick between C's and alchemy. Oh, that is such a tough question. It's really a matter of what do you see have you gone through the courses and what works better for you? I mean, there are people that do IZSS all day long. They hate C's. I see the C's entries for myself. So it's really a matter of what you see. Yeah. Just figure out what works. Are you a trender? Are you a scalper? You can get some really good trends with alchemy. And we've got some more fun stuff coming out, hopefully next week. That next toolkit release date, I'm not sure. I'm thinking there will probably be one next week. Okay. Any other last minute questions? And then we'll wrap it up. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and thanks for coming. We'll see you in the Elite Room on Monday morning. Bye, guys.